I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with Rita Snyder on the end, and then we'll work this way because you already know pretty much a lot about Heather Carter, and Heather will be our last one.
I'm here as a representative for Arizona AARP.
My name is Jeff Hardy. I'm the career advisor for Chamberlain University College of Nursing. My primary job with our school is to help our students when they first come to the school, when they're in school, and once they graduate to find employment. So I do get with a lot of students that are looking for the caregiver positions. One of my things I will do is I'll bring companies into the school to talk to the classes. So if that's something of interest to you, please let me know.
Hi everyone, I am Molly Cohen and I am here representing the Department of Education, the Career and Technical area of education, specializing in the health science technologies.
My name is Bill Kennard and I'm with Access. I'm the Administrator of Healthcare Workforce Development.
We really are facing a silver tsunami and people think about it, they talk about it, but you live it every single solitary day in the work that you do, and I think that it's important that the work that you do informs and influences the policies and decisions that we put forward. And if we don't address this workforce issue, we're going to wake up one morning and have so many people that need so much care in a variety of different settings. We're not going to have enough people to provide the care.
So first question is, are you aware of some national initiatives to help caregivers? Awareness, funding, and training. Bill, I'm going to punt it over to you because you are working for Access, so maybe you are aware of some of these things that are available. And then I'd like you to take it.
Well, certainly, I think on the training side particularly, I see two trends. One is the idea of really trying to really kind of professionalize in a not in a kind of better than or kind of a licensure way, but to professionalize the idea of caregiving in the eyes of the public. To say that this is a really valued position, and that it, in addition to being valued, it's not about other people, it's about you and I. Probably most of us have a caregiver in our immediate future at some point, right? So it's kind of like, this isn't about somebody else that we don't have to care about. We care about ourselves, we care about our families. So I think first of all, it's kind of that idea of really thinking about, talking about the industry in a really different way. So I've seen that. I've also seen really around the training, and there's some discussions here in Arizona about how can you eliminate some of the training barriers, improving reciprocity between caregivers and assisted living and the direct caregiving force, the home caregivers. So I think we're kind of looking at some of those kinds of things. So that kind of that awareness of the importance of the industry, and then looking at eliminating barriers just around getting into the field and then enabling people to stay in.
I'll answer that in a couple of different directions in terms of what AARP, and I'm speaking nationally, what AARP is looking at. The first thing is, and I mentioned the policy book, and I would really encourage you to look at that, because one of the emphasis in there, particularly in the chapter that they write, and I'll read you the title of this, is creating an adequate, well-trained workforce for long-term LTSS, long-term services and supports. And one of the things that struck me when I was recently looking at this is what are we incorporating into our training? What kinds of skills do we need our caregivers to have to both protect them, and I'm thinking of lifting accidents, those kinds of things, as well as the increasing acuity we see with some of our in-home residents.
One of the questions that we didn't really answer was funding. And funding's a challenge. Getting funding to do the kind of work that our caregivers are doing for the training, it takes dollars. And all of you guys out there know that when we hire caregivers and we're bringing them aboard, sometimes they are really at the end of their ropes and don't have the means to even get a CPR first aid card or get a fingerprint clearance. So, I don't know if, there's something we can do from a funding standpoint as a state.
A lot of times people come to the legislature looking for specific funding for a particular program. And that can be very effective when you have a constituency that comes together and creates this incredible grassroots advocacy for additional funding. That being said, any funding that would come from the legislature would be competing with other either similar requests within the healthcare space specifically, which there is an enormous pressure on just the entire healthcare budget. One different decision in Washington, D.C., based upon the numbers I showed you, could have a huge impact in Arizona. They changed one way they partner with Arizona on the Medicaid system, and we're looking at a $1-2 billion shortfall in a matter of one decision. So, I think that we always need to be looking for funding outside of the legislature as well. Sometimes that can take public-private partnerships. It can take the form of working with nonprofits, incentivizing public-private partnerships through tax policy. We run a bill in partnership with AARP around just providing tax credits for retrofitting your home to allow you to age in a home. So there's all different avenues that you can take, but the real important kind of takeaway from this sort of quick survey of that landscape is that the entire room would have to be together on what that one solution is, put all of the other ideas to the side, and everybody focus on this one solution. That would be number one. That's what we did when we looked at Medicaid restoration and expansion. That being said, I think it cannot be overlooked at partnering with a larger education initiative across more high schools, even down to the middle school level. Challenge around our CTE, which I could talk for about hours, which I won't bore everybody, but we've had budget conversations in Arizona where just how do we fund CTE? Do we fund it at 100%? We fund it at 98%? We just got back to funding at 100%. That was part of the budget. Yay, she knows what I'm talking about. It's a big issue. We still don't fund 9th grade CTE. I think we can get CTE all the way down to the middle school because we need to capture the hearts and minds and passion of our youth long before they get to high school. Sometimes they're already on one path or not by the time they get to high school. So any way that if you have immediate needs in your community, partnering even earlier than high school, like in the middle school with your local community. I know the gentleman that introduced me is on a school board. Where is he in the back talking? I can't see. Not even talking? No. Get to your school boards and say, is there a way that you can create a partnership with your schools, knowing that these new programs and opportunities exist? Because that's the way you can do kind of a long-range planning around this issue. But you're going to have to look at this from a variety of different avenues, but if you do want to come to the legislature, you need to have one ask and you need to have thousands of people behind you. So either pick one thing or try and look across multiple avenues outside of just one avenue and try and figure new and innovative ways to get funded for this.
Thank you.
And reducing barriers. I mean, if you don't mind. You mentioned just reducing barriers for movement within the workspace. It's not going to add more bodies to the workforce. Moving from an in-facility caregiver to an in-home caregiver, is it going to add more, people in the larger scope of healthcare? But it can make the difference within your one particular piece of the delivery system. And I know this exists as a challenge. We had a senior caucus. It was brought up at the senior caucus. I'm committed to working through that, making sure that the government's not standing in the way, but there's this balance back all the way down, making sure we have appropriate checks and balances in place at the government, fingerprint clearance card, making sure that people are properly trained to go in and provide the services, but not putting too many roadblocks in the way of people making it unaffordable and then access is screwed up as well. So it's kind of a yin-yang.
Oh, absolutely. As we wrap up, I want to have each one of our panelists leave you, and I'm going to start with Representative Carter, and then she's going to walk off the stage and we'll go down the line. But I want each one of them to leave you a lasting impression of what they feel is maybe a thought, a solution that we should be considering in terms of trying to help solve this crisis that we're dealing with. So Representative Carter, why don't you give some last remaining thoughts, if you would.
First of all, it has been a pleasure to be here today, and I hope that, my passion has come through in the two different sections of this conversation, both in the presentation and here on the panel. And I think, I'm just going to put a big exclamation point on the end of it. If this group gets organized and you are organized, if you get organized around advocacy at the legislature, it can be transformative. Because if we took a map of Arizona and everybody put their address in today, just the people in this room, I bet it would touch every corner of the state. And we have 30 legislative districts, and if you look out across your network, so your other administrators in your business, your caregivers, and even the people that you serve, and if we had that one clear, specific ask, it could be transformative, and it could compete with all of the other asks that we have in the budget. But without that kind of clear, unified, and organized voice, it just gets lost in the mix of everything else that we have to sort of manage and juggle at the Capitol. So my hope is that every time I come in front of a group like this and talk, I hope that something I said spurs that one piece of passion in your heart to say, you know what, I may hate politics, but it's time for me not to just kind of bury my head in the sand. I'm going to just do one thing to get involved and engaged, and if it's send that email, if it's reach out to that one elected official, today, do it. So I'm going to leave you with a homework assignment because I'm a teacher at heart. Are you ready? And I haven't assigned this homework assignment probably in the last 9 months, so let's see if it's different. Here, Paula, you know my homework assignment. Do I not do this in every single solitary speech? Right? And she's been in many different job positions where she's heard me assign this homework. And only one group, maybe two, but one group outperformed all the other groups, and it was the athletic trainers. So let's see if we can beat the athletic trainers. You're going to go home, you're going to look up who your elected officials are right now in the legislature, and you're going to send them an email and say, Heather Carter told me to email you and introduce myself. And then you're going to say, will you please forward this email to Heather to show that you did it? And the athletic trainers outperformed all other groups. And you know how many emails I received? I think it was 10, 12. So it's not a high bar, guys.
We can do better than that.
It is not a high bar, so.
And can I make another homework assignment?
Yes.
Because
But keep it simple. 'Cause
I am going to keep it
that's so
simple. Because the next legislative session is until January.
Right.
If you've not registered down at the Capitol
For the request to speak.
for the request to speak and to vote,
And a vote.
you need to make your way down there and register so you can vote and request to speak remotely.
Right. You
Because
can't vote remotely. Oh gosh, that's a whole other one.
Request to
But you
speak.
can request to speak and register your support or opposition
That's what I
to
meant.
bills remotely.
I meant support
But to
or
vote, you have to
opposition.
go to the polls on Tuesday if you haven't already returned your ballot.
Thank you. Thank you,
I'm
Representative
going to jump on a
Carter.
conference call. Thank you.
So Bill. Sir. Your lasting remarks, thoughts about this caregiver crisis that we're dealing with?
Well, just a couple of things. One, before I kind of get into that, the last question that came from the audience sparked a thing that I just read actually, and I said, geez, that's something we should probably look at. Retirees associations, particularly with large companies. American Express is the one that I'm kind of thinking of. A lot of times have a kind of a social organization kind of mission to kind of find volunteer or kind of time investment opportunities for their retirees as well as some of their current employees. But with the retirees, the idea of maybe looking at them as a potential source of new workers. And the thing I was struck by with the study from American Express was what they were doing internally was just saying, here's all these volunteer opportunities. And they were really surprised that people didn't know that these volunteer opportunities existed that they were interested in. So, I mean, caregiving, I think, is certainly one of those things There's also another piece of research that suggested that if you were a caregiver at one time, you're like 2 or 3 times more likely to be wanting to do caregiving again in the future. So I think those are kind of just some things that, we're looking at how do we mobilize that part of our community. But I think that, the thing that the takeaway for me is Caffrey made a statement at one of our long-term care workforce advisory committees. So we formed a committee of industry leaders to really advise myself and the workforce development administrators from the healthcare plans. We're trying to kind of come up with a good strategy to support this whole idea of workforce strengthening in long-term care. And Caffrey said, I've got a workforce that's some of my workers are like one flat tire away from not being able to work for a couple of weeks. And it really hit me. And as we began to talk with Stephen Campbell again at PHI, one of the things that he said is the most impactful strategy is this idea of really looking internally and saying, how can we relate and provide more support to this workforce? I mean, we talked about salaries and training and things like that, but that takes a while to materialize. What can we do right now? What kind of supports can we mobilize in our community to really sort of make it easier for our workers to actually do the work that they want to do? And I think that's just something that, again, it's kind of like something that we can do that you can turn into action fairly quickly. So, again, I echo Representative Carter's thoughts that I really am honored to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to, if you have me back in another year, that maybe what we've done is we've identified a couple of, impactful solutions, and we're moving towards them in ways that maybe we're more speculating about right now. So, thank you, and thank you for the work that you do.
So as we heard today talking about removing barriers and also changing mindset, one thing that I would like to encourage everybody in this room is to discover their passion, to have that conversation with them. But also, if you grew up in that same time frame as myself, what we used to call career and technical education, voc ed, and it was for those students, I think you probably know what I'm talking about. But right now, career and technical education is booming in this state. And I wanted to thank Heather personally because our legislature has such great support for CTE, and we do have some wonderful programs that are out there. And I highly recommend that you encourage these students to take these programs. They're elective programs, but we still have somewhat of that mentality of it's either career or college path, and change that or to and. Career and college, have them do both. It is the perfect path to get started out as a direct care worker for that student who does want to go into the nursing program and then move forward from there. But that's when we're going to start building up that workforce and getting everybody just really excited about it again. It doesn't have to stop or start, but just a continuation. But it really does start in those high schools, and really let those students take it. Just because you're definitely in the college prep course, going in that path, let them take those career and technical programs as well. Remember, they're free. I mean, you're paying for these really, and you're not paying for these. They're virtually free. There are some supply costs in some of them, but for the majority of them, they are free to the student, and what they get is so valuable. So I highly encourage that we take advantage of those, and you just kind of get the word out. CTE is the way to go, for sure. So thank you for letting me be here today, and I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I understand your plight, I really do. I work with Kathleen from Cypress, HomeCare. I do get calls from recruiters asking for 10 to 15 caregivers weekly, so I understand where you're coming from. Again, one of the solutions that I have now is when I bring a company into our school to talk to our freshmen, what have you, bring a caregiver. The first question that they always ask me when they come in to talk to me about employment, they don't care about how much money they're making. That's not their big concern. Their big concern is when you work with our school schedule. because our schedules change every 8 weeks. So if 1 week they're working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 8 weeks later they're going to go Thursday, Friday, Saturday kind of thing. That would be one thing to talk about. The other thing is if you have a staff, a BSN, RN on your staff, we could also possibly look at being a clinical partner with you where it's kind of like an externship where the students are getting on-the-job training. So that's another thing that we could look at possibly doing with these companies that are here. Other than that, I wish you all the best. I thank you very much for having me on here, and thank you.
Well, I think one of the things that's really apparent is the solutions are going to need to be multi-pronged. And a couple of things came to mind with some of the cultural comments. I think we have to change stereotypes, and we have to sort of get rid of this mindset that it's a poverty worker that goes into the home care setting. I really agree with that, and I think the only way to break up some of those stereotypes, and I've lived with this as a nurse for years, and you've heard many of those, but is exposure. And I think having all age levels exposed to your environments, providing opportunities either to volunteer or to work part-time, all of those are wonderful strategies that I think really need to be addressed. I think having seniors in your environments, even if it's a volunteer group, use care hospitals. My background is primarily in hospitals. We've had volunteers in hospitals for many, many years. We've had the industry volunteers. Some of those models could maybe, I know many of you are in smaller settings, but some of those models could, if you did some alliances or maybe through your association, you could pull together and have volunteers that might be available. That's another way of opening up your worlds to exposure and getting people to see that some of the stereotypes truly do not apply. The other thing that's really important at AARP is to recognize that your home care caregivers go into home settings, and they vary greatly, and so the training is going to have to reflect that, and that's, I think, a really important aspect of what you're looking at, and what should training comply with. Now, Representative Carter kind of read, we do have an issue for balance on all of this, and I realize that, but you want to protect your workers and provide the work cultures that I think will really be most supportive of them. We've done years and years of work on job satisfaction for acute care nurses, and one of the things we found is that, as has been mentioned, salary is not the core issue. It will come up as a readily identifiable target if people are unsatisfied. But if we can figure out how to build good work cultures, then that may perhaps balance that out a little bit. Right now, for senior nurses that are retiring because the nursing workforce is in such drastic shape, we really have an issue with it. We're trying to create work environments that are more facilitative for senior nurses, so that we can work beyond 65, 70 in those kinds of environments and really look at the type of setting. So I think attention to some of those kinds of things really are very crucial. And thank you very much for inviting me and providing me